Hello, welcome to Renew Our Minds. If you are new to memorizing the Bible and would like to begin, you've come to the right place. I will go through a step-by-step tutorial for memorizing Psalm 1 in the English Standard Version. This psalm is a great place to start memorizing because it is short and full of visual images. This psalm is also packed with wisdom and promises for a daily walk with Christ. This video will also include techniques helpful to those who have memorized for some time. For example, when I first made a commitment to memorize Bible verses in 2016, I started with the book of James, and it took me several months. Then, only a month later, it was very difficult to recall most of the passages. Over time, I found ways that made memorizing more efficient as well as easier to recall these verses. I will include these techniques in this video. Feel free to pause throughout this video in order to practice the steps that we'll go through. Let's jump right in. Let us start with verse 1. Saying the verse out loud to the rhythm is one memorization method that I found very helpful and also fun in learning verses. So I underlined the syllables that we will say with the beat. For example, 1, 2, 3, 4. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. The green asterisks after the third and fourth lines mean that there is no word to say on that beat. You can also tap your fingers or foot, clap, or walk in step while saying the verse out loud to the rhythm. Next, how can we remember the order of the three verbs in this verse, which are to walk, stand, and sit? Notice the progression of movement, from walking to standing to sitting. Let's visualize these actions as we memorize the verse. Next, is there an easier way to remember the three sets of nouns, which are counsel of the wicked, way of sinners, and seat of scoffers? First, I highlighted and underlined the first letter of the two nouns in each set. For example, C and W are underlined for counsel of the wicked. Let's create a mnemonic, or a memory aid, by picking a name or object that you associate with these letters. Here are the names that came to my mind. Actor Christopher Walken for CW, author William Shakespeare for WS, and director Steven Spielberg for SS. Now when I repeat the verse out loud from memory, I visualize Christopher Walken walking, William Shakespeare standing, and Steven Spielberg sitting. Try this out and feel free to pick different names or objects that you are familiar with. Let us continue to the next verse. Similar to the rhythm method introduced in verse 1, we will say the verse out loud to the rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. Next, to verse 3. Let's say the verse out loud to the rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4. He is like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. In all that he does, he prospers. You'll notice I added a beat after the second line to catch my breath. Feel free to add beats to pause where needed or change the tempo as well. Let's think about the meaning of this verse and visualize it. The author of this psalm was David, who was well acquainted with the desert. He knew how vital it was for trees in the desert to have access to water, or else the tree would die. He compared a person who continuously and daily meditates on God's word to a tree planted by streams of water. When you say this verse, picture a tree with vibrant green leaves. Reflect and pray about how you can commit to meditating continuously on God's precious word. Moving on to verse 4, let's say this verse out loud to the rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4. The wicked are not so, but are like the chaff that the wind drives away. I researched the agricultural context of this verse. When the farmer harvests the wheat, which is also called winnowing, the farmer tosses the chaff into the wind. Why? Because the chaff is the inedible outer husk of the grain, which is unusable. This helped me visualize and reflect on the stark contrast between the thriving tree in verse 3 and the chaff blown away in the wind. Next, let's say verse 5 out loud to the rhythm and visualize the verse. 1, 2, 3, 4. Therefore, the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. I will share a mnemonic that helped me remember the specific words. I underlined the first letter of the noun, verb, and noun in each line, which would be WSJ and SCR. The letters WSJ reminded me of the newspaper named Wall Street Journal. Then I tried to think of something that this newspaper could include with the letters SCR, which would be a stock crash report. Try this out and feel free to pick different names or objects that you are familiar with. Moving on to the last verse, let's say it out loud to the rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. Now let's bring together the entire psalm and say it to the rhythm, visualizing the verses as well. 1, 2, 3, 4. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. In all that he does he prospers. The wicked are not so, but are like the chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. There are 5 more memorization tips that have worked really well. When I first learned the verse, I say the verse out loud about 10 times or until I can say it correctly from memory without looking at the words. Second, I build upon the verses. So if I were learning verse 4 today, I would also repeat verses 1, 2, and 3 along with it several times. Third thing that I found helpful is to write the verses on a small sheet of paper and keep it with me. Then throughout the day, I would try saying the verses out loud from memory and then refer to the paper to make sure it was correct. Let's say it took me a week to memorize these 6 verses. Then for the next 30 days, I would repeat the entire Psalm 1 from memory. This review helps cement it in my mind and easier to recall later. And then I saved the most important memorization tip for last. I ask God to help me memorize, understand, and obey His Word. I have found that He loves to answer this prayer. There is so much joy and blessing in knowing and living out His Word. If you have any questions or things you would like to see in future videos, feel free to post a comment to this video or email me at renewourminds12@gmail.com. Thank you for your time.